What you need to do is to realize that taking action, enabling and relying upon the discipline that you're going to continue to build and optimize over time will most likely, if not inevitably, result into a life of which you may not have had a 100% complete picture of, but a picture that is beautiful in itself. I think I'd like to talk on at least the reaction to self, if you'd want to tackle the reaction of others. And because for me, it's been the reaction of self, of finding that new purpose, is just a lot. It's really fresh for me coming out of treatment. Multiple lines of treatment, and the evolution of that, because in 2022 going into 2023, when I stepped out of my first technical relapse, but first 9 months of treatment, I realized that I had not built to the fullest capacity that impossible self. I was still, in our previous recording, I discussed it a little bit about of like this lapse of ability to take things seriously and to really enact and to harness and to be able to enable that round of discipline as well. And so there were a lot of things that were missing coming out of that first round of treatment. And so when it came to where to focus where to focus onto which pathway at that moment was still very wild. But what I'll keep reiterating is that we took action, because 2023, we start Impossible Performance. We start the podcast. We took action.
With no idea what we were doing, by the way.
No clue what we were doing.
Absolutely no concept, no idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had like 8 different things that we wanted to accomplish with Impossible Performance, and then shortly into 2023, we realized, okay, we're gonna cut a few of those out. We're gonna
trim down a little bit.
We're gonna hone this in, and that came with a reaction to what we were feeling, and ultimately reaction to how much time we were spending on so many different things, and being willing to, when you analyze self and progress at that point, we quickly realized that we had way too many fingers and too many different pies. So let's focus in a little bit, and that's where kind of like the first step of evolution had came, because we realized we wanted to do podcast, and we wanted to have a YouTube channel that was just like creating content, and we wanted to coach, and we wanted to speak, and we wanted to do this, and we wanted to do that, and ultimately we're doing a lot of those now. But like first starting off, having no experience with any of those, we quickly realized that it's like, hey, let's get good at 1 or 2, maybe 3 things right now, and then we can enact upon the others down the road, because we still want to do it, and that's ultimately what we're doing now. And so I think that first step, that first kind of like 6 months to a year, we had that pause and that self-reflection. And that was very, very powerful. And especially for somebody like me, it was important, because especially in 2023, when I had my second relapse in September of 23, that individual of which I was in that moment, I remember vividly that relapse. And like when I was in the hotel room in Boulder, Colorado, technically a different town, but I was working in Boulder. I remember I felt the lift note and I called you, and I freaked out. I was very much in a panic, and that sort of taking a step back in life was very, very profound. It's understandable that anybody in my position in that moment would have had a similar reaction, but hindsight, I know now the person that I am now would have been able to deal a lot better with that. And that's because we went through these different sacraments of pausing, taking self-reflection, analyzing what's been happening, and ultimately optimizing from there. So we go into the end of 2023. I head down to Houston for treatment. You're left with pretty much all of the work, for what, a 6-week period that I was down there in total. And so again, we're having to take this reflection of self, collecting of self, and in terms of me, and then going into 2024, I had some personal life changes that also happened within my personal life, some really big changes, but we kept the business going. And we kept Impossible Performance going, and we kept the podcast going, and the podcast is just taking off, and we're starting to figure things out in terms of what's the reaction of others at that point. Because we had that first initial flicker of reaction from others, like, oh, this is so cool, but we were still very localized. So obviously that stockpile of ammunition firing off, stockpile wasn't really that big in that moment. Like, we had that flame, and then it was just like, okay, and then we had to enact upon that discipline of like, okay, well, we got to keep going. We get into 2024, and that's where we started to have more and more reaction from kind of the from the reaches of our ideas and of our impact. As it went out further and further, we had more and more reaction from further coming in, thus giving us that opportune moment of like, okay, well, there's something really happening here. There's something really valuable happening here. And the reaction to myself, and I believe I could say something similar for you as well, is that kind of helped the self legitimize the path that we were on. Personally, I relied on self for so much of that, just doing the work, like keeping the head down, doing the work. And as it gets further and further out, we're like, okay, this is going pretty well. And then I relapse again. And ultimately have to go in for the BMT, which, as I've described previously, was not a good time. And again, you had to cover things, and it was difficult for me because it was something that was so rooted within the disciplinary daily and weekly practice that I had to sit back and go, I have to sit here and collect myself again. I have to redistribute what I'm looking at in terms of what's possible in this moment while I'm trying to recover, because the bone marrow transplant was obviously brutal. I'll watch my language there, but it was brutal. I mean, you were there for almost a week of my recovery during that process, and that was not a good time. And so then coming out of that, going into 2025, this is where I believe my full self, especially after that trip to Scotland, I was able to come back, reset, and I was able to take that time to analyze and to reflect and to optimize self going into 2025. Get back home. I get back to the work that you'd been doing, and that is where I believe self and then reaction of others, really, they were just so aligned at that point. They were they were both well fed. They were both being supplied with so much nutrients that they were blooming into something absolutely incredible. And then going into the end of 2025 into this year here, where we said in January, I mean, I remember that conversation vividly, because we now look back and we're like, no idea this is where we would be not even 6 months in. And to look back, that was because of for my journey, it was the care, it was the caring for, the collection of, the reflection of, and then the analyzation, and ultimately the optimization. Going through all of that throughout the past 4-ish years now, I believe is where I've been able to personally take that sort of ethereal guarantee, because it's not like we don't have anything that's just like set in paper that says your life has changed. It's come through so much back and forth, left and right, up and down, this 3 to 4, even 4-dimensional process, going through those years, and ultimately getting to this point here where I go, wow, that was all worth it. And it was worth it because, to try to wrap things up here, is that throughout that time, I still relied upon a sense of discipline that I was ultimately optimizing, but enabling myself to rely upon, but to continue to build. Going through all of that. And then finally, to this point here today, I can go back and say, I trusted in myself. I felt the reaction of myself in those times of where I was able to, of the times of, months of doing the podcast and speaking to guests and meeting incredible people, to the month or two that had to take off once a year of no interaction at all and no duty and gratefulness that you were like, hey, like I get it, like you need to work on yourself right now, and survive. But coming out of that into then now we have the fire of reaction of others plus the fire of self that has just come to this that has grown into this absolutely beautiful thing. That's where I've been able to feel the approval and the guarantee that I am on the right path, is because we have gone through, and I have gone through that crucible of challenging self, of challenging what I am able to do and what I'm capable of doing, and pushing those boundaries, and ultimately is led myself here to this point of saying, I am extremely thankful that I listened to my discipline, I clinged on to it, but also I took action. Mm-hmm. In those separate bouncing backs from months or simply just severity of treatment. Every relapse, it was a time of, okay, I need to take action and work on this. I need to take action and work on that. So building self is not, like you said, it's not like I'm 100% here. I know exactly what I'm doing from here, and 5 years from now, I'm going to be doing exactly what I'm doing now in this moment. No. If that's so, great. Do not rely upon that idea, though, to come to fruition. What you need to do is to realize that taking action, enabling and relying upon the discipline that you're going to continue to build and optimize over time will most likely, if not inevitably, result into a life of which you may not have had a 100% complete picture of, but a picture that is beautiful in itself.